Radio Retro Future has been made possible by the Groene Vee absinthe. Some of the best artisanal absinthe from the Netherlands. You can find their selections of homemade absinthe, both white and green, on thegroenevee.nl/en, or click the link down in the description.
Radio Retro Future.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Steampunk Beginner's Guide Editorials, where I try to get some form of discussion started on retrofuturism, like steampunk. Actually, these are my rare train of thought videos, but those barely get any views after a week, so I might re-upload those at some point with a different title, so they come up in the YouTube search algorithms, as they are relevant to the Steampunk Beginner's Guide. Except these are more in-depth and you need to have some knowledge on steampunk to know what I'm talking about. So yeah, at one point in my videos I want to talk about the other punks and retrofuturism, but now I just want to talk about progress, especially the progress within the Dieselpunk community. Also, last weekend I've been to Steamtropolis in Germany. Simple next, thank you for your invitation, where I gave a presentation on kind of this subject. So, because I don't have that much material from the convention, it was rather small, I will include that footage in this video as well in between bits, so you don't have to look at my face all the bloody time. You see, I don't know why, but I always get the feeling that people have created a kind of duality between steampunks and the other punks. Like which one will go on the longest, or which one is more popular with the kids these days. Now, I'm reading stuff like this, that steampunk is on its way out or something. If that's true, I am not seeing it. My channel is still growing. If you look on platforms like Steam, steampunk-inspired games are still coming out. Steamborg, that recently came out, looks amazing. I haven't played it yet. And then there are some titles that are coming up I'm really looking forward to, like Ascent, Infinite Realms, or Air, and Frostpunk, especially Frostpunk, which is a city builder which I'm really looking forward to. But these are just video games, right? It just happens to be another passion of mine. But you know, there are still books being published, there are still short films and films coming out. Then there's the project of Steven Spielberg, which I'm curious if that's still gonna happen or not. And also the guys of Clockwork Heart were working together with Jim Henderson Studios. Not sure if there's any new updates on that. But yeah, we might have to look forward to a steampunk inspired series by Jim Henderson Studios, who are known from things like the Muppets. And then there's stuff like this, right? This is Scythe, the board game, with the art by our very own Jacob Rosalski, made by Stonemeyer, which I also had on the show. Now, this is a very interesting one, because Dieselpunks love to call this game typical example of Dieselpunk, which is really interesting on several levels, because first off, Jacob Rosalski was inspired by steampunk. I got this from the horse's mouth when I asked Stonemeyer about this. It also takes place in the 19th century, so there are those two things that kind of make me really wonder what the Dieselpunks think they're doing by labeling everything they like Dieselpunk. If you want an example of what I consider Dieselpunk, try the Wolfenstein series. It has the occult, it has evil scientists, Nazi undead super soldiers conquering the world with technology they use from a lost civilization. Now, that's Dieselpunk if I've ever seen it. If you want another good example, try this game, Tannhauser. Unfortunately, it's out of print, so you're gonna have to buy it from places like eBay. Maybe there are some new editions laying around somewhere on a shelf. Now, of course, there have been steampunks calling everything they like steampunk. I've been critical of this for a very long time as well. I'm just not seeing it that often anymore. It seems that steampunks have become really careful what they're calling steampunk these days. And with the Dieselpunks, on the other hand, they seem to be on a kind of a labeling Dieselpunk frenzy these last couple of months. And I find it weird, because they're also labeling stuff like Inglorious Bastards as Dieselpunks. They've been labeling the man in the high castle as Dieselpunk. Now, you can make a case for man in the high castle. As it is your typical alternate history, the universe is aware it's a parallel timeline. It knows that something happened that makes it different from the world that we know. That brings it into the realm of science fiction. Yet the story is very focused on the life in Nazi-occupied America. There's nothing otherworldly outside of the films that the characters find that show the fall of the German Reich. But to call stuff like Man in the High Castle or Inglourious Basterds Dieselpunks, to me, is overreaching. But it doesn't mean there is no connection, because it sure as hell inspired Dieselpunk. For example, I don't consider the Rocketeer Dieselpunk either. I consider that a thing that inspired Dieselpunk. Now, Wolfenstein is a little hard to say, because the idea of Nazis conquering the world during the Second World War using otherworldly technology is so old. Just look at all the countless conspiracy theories about the Nazis being in cahoots with aliens, or using supernatural powers to acquire their knowledge, all that stuff. So Wolfenstein basically took that old trope before anyone even heard of Steampunk, let alone Dieselpunk. But it did get its inspiration from the same place. That this Americana-fueled pulp era that is the first half of the 20th century. And because Dieselpunk seems to be so focused on American pop culture, it's possibly the reason why there is no large Dieselpunk community in Europe. Not for lack of trying, mind you. But there are other contributing factors to that. Look at all the other retro-futuristic movements, for instance, that we have going on right now. We have the Chaps, there is Neo-Swing, there are the Psychobillies, Second World War reenactment is pretty big where I come from. Many of these are already more popular than the Dieselpunk community is. Then there is a mainstream retrofuturism that we see in games and movies that may be inspired by Dieselpunk and Steampunk, but are not necessarily meant to be that. I think that's also very important to note, that the mainstream is taking all these retrofuturistic aesthetics back at this point. So I expect that people will be talking less about Steampunk as it's becoming more commonplace in current design. So there's that. But both Steampunks and Dieselpunks seem to have this impression that they have a monopoly on the aesthetics. And I'm sorry to break it to you, but you don't. Neither groups do. So my question to Dieselpunks is, what sets Dieselpunks apart from all these other trends, movements and subcultures that we have going on? Because that's a question I can't really answer for myself. When it comes to Steampunk, what makes that so special? For one, there's a lot of output. There are a lot of people within the community making stuff, making art, that use that platform to promote their work. I see that less in the Dieselpunk community, because yes, there are of course artists that do. There are artists within the Dieselpunk community, but they don't seem to be as prolific at this point. Then the other thing that I see right now is how developed the Steampunk community is. Not just in size, but also in how well it is communicating to the outside what it is. You know, they create platforms for artists to communicate ideas, not just to one another, but also to the outside world. And I think that's something that Dieselpunk community has to work on. Based on what I see, it's very focused on itself, on its fiction, on the things they like, and well, quite frankly, trying to appropriate anything they like as Dieselpunk. I don't think this is a smart move. People have been asking me to make a video on Dieselpunk, And the problem is, if I would do that, I would make the exact same video as the first episode of the Steampunk Beginner's Guide. They're very like steampunks, a little bit too much like steampunks, perhaps. The only difference I really see is that the Dieselpunks seem to be far more focused on their fiction, more so than the steampunks do. And then also the kind of photos they produce seem to be more focused on modeling, rather than, I don't think it's an appropriate word, but more on modeling than it is cosplay. But that's just what I see. Again, this is what I have seen. I think that the Dieselpunks really need to develop their platform in more ways. Well, they've got some pretty huge podcasts, like the Fedora Chronicles and the Diesel Powered Podcast, where I am syndicated on. So there's that, because it gives people a platform to share ideas and influences, where people can physically immerse themselves in geek culture. It also helps that steampunks to communicate what they do, because it attracts attention from local newspapers and such. What also helps is that steampunks tend to be a little more alien than Dieselpunk. I think that makes steampunk feel less like people walking around in all dusty clothes. So to people, steampunks are clearly not reenactors. And that is what Dieselpunks seem to communicate as of late. That they want to be like chaps, so to speak. More a lifestyle. But what brings me back to my earlier point, they have a lot to compete with in terms of, the chaps themselves and Neo Swing. Again, what sets Dieselpunks apart in that regard from all those other movements? And here I want to come back on that remark that I saw, that steampunk is on its way out. No, that the goths in brown is an old stereotype. It's not correct anymore. There is this idea that steampunk in particular is this static thing, that it hasn't changed since 2012 when I started. And that's not the case. When you talk to artists in the steampunk community, they're kind of done with the neo-Victorian, the very elaborate, very detailed art. They're moving more into what people would define as dieselpunk. But these people have no intention of abandoning the steampunk community. They are still there. They just have developed different tastes, and they'll keep developing different tastes. The steampunk of today will look very differently from that of 2024, to name an example. In this case, you'll get more things like scythe, instead of the very busy aesthetic that steampunk has become known for. I don't think steampunks have communicated that very well. Very important thing is that steampunk has a lot of traditions, and they're developing new traditions that will be transported all over the world. Take teapot racing that started in New Zealand, and now you can play it in the United States, you can play it in Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, etc., etc. The same goes for two dealing, which is now played all over the world. So I think that the Dieselpunks need to what they want, what they do, what their traditions are, so to speak. And if Americana is what they are about, well, that's fine, because that's, again, the sense that I'm getting. The downside of that, if that is the case, I don't think Dieselpunk has much of a chance in Europe, for obvious reasons. Maybe Dieselpunk, in that regard, can take over Steampunk in United States. I don't think so. I don't think it will, because it already has so much to compete with. So I guess I'll end my video with the question, what sets Dieselpunks apart from other retro-futuristic movements? Not just talking about steampunk, I'm also talking about things like Neo Swing and stuff like that. I'm not interested in superficial, in the superficial differences. I really want to know, like, what is it that truly inspires them? That's my question. So yeah, and if you really wanna commit to answering that question, please leave me a video response. I would like that. But of course, you're also more than welcome to answer in the comments of this video. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna bid you adieu, and as always, make it your way. Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I made this because I am in a bit of a video making melange right now, but this format allows me to make videos quicker until I am starting on the next episode of the Steampunk Beginner's Guide. Just some quick channel updates. The Radio Retro Future for Fallout videos will be up later this month. For those that want to listen to it in the video game, the mod will be launched somewhere around 20 December. Follow the link down below if you want to download the mod in advance. It already has loads of content to begin with. For those that can't wait, for $1 a month you can support me on Patreon and you'll get early access to most of the content, as well as access to our Discord server, and I'm working on some merch. Happy that you took the time to watch this video, so please like, comment and subscribe if you did, and I hope to see you next time.